podcast with James D. Jackson.
Hello and welcome again to the Rip Jersey podcast. I'm your host, James D. Jackson, and man, we had another good night of sports. We got basketball to get into, we got baseball to get into, and we got to talk about some of the NBA scores from around the league. But hey, first, if you're watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast app, subscribe to the podcast, man. We do a lot of good work here, but enough of that self-promotion. Let's get right into it.
All right, let's go. Here's the first story of the day.
I talked about my top 5 teams heading into the NBA this season, just on the last pod. I talked about how I had Memphis and the Nets as my honorable mention teams, just outside of the top 5. I had the 76ers, the Clippers, the Celtics, the Bucks, and the Warriors as my top 5 teams. And heading into the NBA, I felt like that was a good list, and I still do. But there's just another team that I think is emerging as this season starts, because we didn't know how Zion Williamson would look coming back to New Orleans Pelicans. And what they accomplished last year without him was already an outstanding feat. But now with him on the floor, I think things are a lot different now. Because the first story of the day is the New Orleans Pelicans blew out the Brooklyn Nets 130-108 in the season opener as the Pelican stars shined. Now you had Brandon Ingram give you 28 and 7, CJ McCollum gave you 21 and 4, and Zion Williamson gave you 25 and 9 in his first game back. Now the last time we spoke about this team, they were in the playoffs. They had taken who were at the time the championship favorite, the Phoenix Suns, to 6 games. It was one of those big deals. It was a shocking deal that, the Pelicans were doing this without their best player in Zion Williamson. But now, in the opening night, the Pelicans have already beat one of my top 7 teams in the NBA. They beat Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and Ben Simmons of the Brooklyn Nets. And now that they've done this, I was already convinced last year that they were going to be a good squad. I was already convinced. You can go back and look at it on my older videos. I was already convinced that they were going to be a team to be dealt with. But now, as I've talked about my top 7 teams in the NBA heading into this season, I think we need to talk about some of the top teams that are going to head into the future. Some of the teams like the Cavs, those young teams that are going to be great in the years to come. And I think the New Orleans Pelicans are actually the number 1 team in that category now. I think they are. This young of a squad to perform the way they perform. This is their first night together, playing with each other, all 3 stars. And they all put up great numbers, as I read earlier, to beat the Brooklyn Nets, who are one of the best teams in the NBA, not just by my standards, by most of the NBA fans and most of the NBA analysts. And what does it take to have a good team? What does it take to have a good contender type of team? Well, the first thing you need is a shot creator. The Pelicans have 2 shot creators. They got Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum. McCollum obviously came in that big trade before the trade deadline last year after playing with Damian Lillard in Portland all those years. And Brandon Ingram has always been one of those great guys of, coming from L.A., where he had a great rookie year and great years in his early years after that. So now you got 2 of those guys that play really well together and are able to shoot the ball anywhere on the court. They can get their own shot up whenever you need a bucket, which is key in the playoffs. Because if one guy's off, another guy's on. The second thing you need is a great defender. The Pelicans have Herbert Jones and Jose Alvarado. We talked about Herbert Jones last year, his his rookie year out there on the floor. He was guarding some of the best guards in the NBA already. He's proven that he can be one of the great defenders. And then you got Jose Alvarado who comes off the bench as a great defensive point guard who can get the opposing team's point guard out of their rhythm. I mean, we saw him do that against Chris Paul, who's one of the greatest point guards of all time. We saw him do that to him in the playoffs last year. And the last thing you need is a great front court. It's the last thing because the NBA now is all about shooting. But if you can dominate with the front court as well, where are you lacking as a team? They have Zion Williamson, who is just pure strength and dominance down low. And they have Jonas Valanciunas, who most people, I think, forgot about on this squad. Valanciunas had 15 points and 13 rebounds in his opening night debut. That's all you'd expect out of a main center. He's your second fiddle because Zion Williamson's on the floor. In a league that's filled with finesse and skill, Zion is going to dominate. He's going to dominate because of how strong he is and able to get to the basket. All of his points were in the paint, seemed like. He had like 22 of his 25 were in the paint. The other ones were free throws. He's not even trying to shoot outside the paint. You got guys like CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram for that. This is a guy that knows where he's the strongest at. And when you get a guy that knows where he's the strongest at, and you got him to get in a good team that can spread the floor for him to give him space, the sky's the limit for the Pelicans. The sky's the limit. Let's get into the next thing.
Here's the second story of the day.
The second story of the day is we'll get into the scores and reactions from some of the games across the league. Let's start with the NBA.
Number 5.
The Grizzlies beat the Knicks in overtime 115-112. And the story coming into this was how would Jalen Brunson look for New York? You know, he came over from Dallas last year. He had a great playoff run. And he finished with 15 points on 7 of 18 shooting in his debut. Not the best shooting night for him, but 15 points for that Knicks team is a great accomplishment. Julius Randle led the Knicks with 24 points. And Ja Morant scored 34, and he was 3 of 6 from 3 as he helped the Grizzlies beat the Knicks in overtime.
Number 4,
Detroit took down Orlando 113-109 at home. Number 1 pick in the NBA draft was Paolo Banchero. It was a lot of excitement around him, and he fed that excitement in his season debut. He continued to show that he's probably the best number 1 pick there was last year. Magic, he had a posterizer against Detroit, dunked on somebody, and he finished with 27 points. One of those great games to start his career. Bojan Bogdanovic for Detroit scored 24 and to lead Detroit there.
Number 3,
the Suns rallied from 22 points down to beat the Mavericks 107-105 at home. That's what they needed after that collapse last year against the Dallas Mavericks. That's a very good way to start the season for them. Luka Doncic had 35 for Dallas in that loss, and Devin Booker had 28 for the Suns. Again, he's showing why he's one of the best young stars there is. Well, is he even a young star at this point? I think he's becoming one of the veterans now in the league because he's been there so long now.
Number 2
is, we'll get to baseball. The San Diego Padres beat the Philadelphia Phillies 8-5 to even the series at 1 in the National League Championship Series. There were 5 runs in the 5th inning, led the Padres to the win, and Brendan Drury had 3 RBI in the win. Another great outing from him.
Number 1,
the Houston Astros took down the New York Yankees 4-2 in Game 1 of the American League Championship Series. This was a long-awaited championship series between these two teams because of what happened with the Astros way back when and how they beat the Yankees in 2017. And supposedly there may have been something else that, well, at least the Yankees believe in 2019. But the Astros again were too much for the Yankees. Houston pitcher Justin Verlander had 11 strikeouts in the win, and that's something you can't really cheat that. Let's get into the next thing.
Here's the third story of the day.
The third story of the day is I want to talk about one of my shorts that I released from the podcast. It got a lot of attention, and it drew some questions from other people. I was asked, how is the standard too high in regards to Cooper Rush, who is the currently the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, replacing Dak Prescott as he's injured right now? And for context, this is what I said. Everybody wants to be right. And there's no problem with that. That's human nature. It just seemed like Cooper Rush wasn't allowed to make a mistake. For those people that didn't want him to be the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. Philly is the number one defense in the NFL in turnovers. Number one. What were you expecting Cooper Rush to do? No other quarterback has been able to do great things against them. So I just think the standard for what we're holding Cooper Rush to is too high. This is the first time he's thrown interceptions, turned the ball over. The point I'm trying to make, you got to give props to where it's due. Sometimes it's the other side that's doing the most work in the battle. It's not Cooper Rush making mistakes. It's the other side making great plays. Now, if you didn't get the message in that, what I'm trying to say is Cooper Rush shouldn't be thrown to the wolves for that loss against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, you can think what you want about him being the starting quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, but I don't think he's a terrible quarterback and he shouldn't be on the field after one bad game against the best defense in the NFL. That was his first time, as I said, throwing an interception or turning the ball over. He had 3 against the number one team that causes turnovers. No quarterback in the NFL has had a good game against that team. So why is he being held to a higher standard than everybody else? That's all I was saying. But hey, I did a podcast yesterday about the NBA season opener. Go check that out if you haven't already. But that's all I have for you today. This has been the Rip Jersey Podcast. I am James D. Jackson, your host, and we appreciate you for sticking along with us. Thanks for watching this video. If you made it this far, like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Also, I have a podcast called Rip Jersey. Follow that, add it to your playlist. Listen to it wherever you can.